Welcome back, everyone. We have an excellent panel of experts to discuss self-generated content and sextortion. This will be an awareness and prevention messaging. Our panel is going to include Jim Cole with Homeland Security Investigations, Jody Hively with the FBI, Jen Newman with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Sean Pierce with the Silicon Valley, San Jose, California Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and Melissa Strobel with Thorn. So Jim, I'm going to start with you and ask that you tell us about yourself and the work that you do and the work that your agency does.
Thank you, Joe. Again, my name is Jim Cole, and I'm a supervisory special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, currently based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I supervise our agency's response to child sexual exploitation, digital forensics, and victim services for Tennessee and Kentucky. And as part of that, HSI's kind of overarching mission, we prioritize crimes against children that are technology facilitated, that cross state lines or international boundaries. And so kind of have a robust capability in that area, including a cyber crime center back in the Washington, D.C. area, and a child exploitation investigations unit that coordinates these cases around the globe for us. We work really closely with our partners like the FBI, Interpol, Europol, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, very, very close relationship there, and several other international agencies around the globe that fight this crime type. And so, we work a lot of these cases just in our Nashville area alone. I've got a team in the specific Nashville area of 6 agents who do nothing but this, and unfortunately, we're all extremely, extremely busy.
I'm Jody Hively, and I am a forensic interviewer with the FBI. I've been with the FBI for about 6 years. I've actually been doing interviews for 17. I'm very familiar with the Nashville HSI team because they work very closely with our FBI team, which is a really great partnership there. So it's nice to see you virtually in person. I actually cover the Washington field office area, the divisions of Richmond, Virginia, and Norfolk, Virginia. I cover the Johnson City, Tennessee RA. I also cover the Charlotte division, which encompasses all of North Carolina. We work pretty closely with our locals and with HSI. I would say that probably upwards of 95% of the interviews that I'm doing has to do with online exploitation, specifically the sextortion piece of it. My background, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I didn't like working with the family piece of it. So I primarily worked with high-risk juveniles and a lot of teenagers in general. Obviously, I don't practice now, but that's kind of the background that I brought in with me.
I think I'm up next. Hi, Joe. Thanks for hosting us today. And hello to my friends and colleagues who are on the panel. It's nice to see you guys after so long. My name is Jen Newman. I'm with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. As a little bit of background about me, I started as a cyber tip analyst in 2001. So that kind of launched my career. That's a little over 20 years now in the fight against child sexual exploitation. So through that time, I held various positions here at NECMEC, all within the Exploited Children Division, certainly working casework. I helped stand up the Child Victim Identification Program and have contributed to the Survivor Services program that we now run. In that time, we've seen a lot change. I know, Jim, Melissa, we've been around for years and years with this, and we've just seen so much change over time. So, it's a incredibly responsive and reactive world that we live in when it comes to crimes against children, specifically online. And so just in terms of what NECMEC does, I right now, I'm an executive director in the Exploited Children Division. I also head up our Austin office. You heard earlier from Belinda Swan, so she works down there in Austin with me as well. So it's nice to have her in the office space. She knows so much about our prevention work and education work. and heads up our community education partnership program. So she's a great resource for us. So I won't hit too much on that since she did such a comprehensive view to start with. But when we talk about prevention and the work that NCMEC does, I think one thing we want to just make sure to highlight is the response that when does something happen, what do you do? You know, it's not all about just prevention. We want to make sure that we incorporate response to that as well, because we never want to make anyone feel like they failed at prevention if something does happen. And unfortunately, there are going to be those incidents when something happens online. And so as part of that, we like to include our response as part of our prevention messaging. And to that end, we have our cyber tip line, which is the U.S. reporting mechanism for suspected incidents of child sexual exploitation. That through the cyber tip line, which last year we received over 29 million reports, we receive reports from both members of the public and also our electronic service providers who are actually mandated to make reports to us of content that they find on their servers. In addition to that, we also have our victim identification program. Jim's a big partner with us in that program as well. And really what that is to identify who or where the children are that we see in that exploitative content, those images or videos, so that we can safeguard those children, help law enforcement safeguarding those children, or at a minimum do a welfare check and make sure they understand what's happening with their imagery online. And then thirdly, we have our survivor services program, and that's also really designed to provide resources to those victims who have had something happen to them as they transition basically from victim to survivor. So that includes assisting them with resources in the mental health in their community, legal representation if they'd like to pursue restitution, and really importantly, especially today's panel topic is content takedown. So when something does happen and a minor has imagery that's put online, we can work with electronic service companies to try to get that content taken down. In addition, our survivors also help inform NCMEC about our resources and our services to ensure that they're trauma informed and really hitting the mark with those audiences that we're trying to reach, those families and those victims who have had something happen to them. So that's just wanted to cover kind of that response view that NCMEC does in this world, because again, we got a great lesson from Belinda earlier about NetSmart, but the response is just as important.
I believe I'm next. First of all, thank you, Joe, for facilitating this. My name is Sergeant Sean Pierce. I've been a police officer with the city of San Jose in California for 25 years. I got my start in the ICAC world in 2002. When I began working with ICAC cases, I've done 2 tours in ICAC, and I currently, for the last 4 years, have been the ICAC commander for the Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So what we encompass, as I believe Jeff Gersh said earlier, the ICAC program is 61 task forces throughout the nation. Every state is covered. States like California and Texas have multiple. I believe we have 5 here in California. And we investigate the crimes that come from NCMEC, the cyber tips that come from the ESPs. And then for San Jose, we also do any kind of exploitation, especially when we have a suspect who is in a position of trust, a teacher, a coach. We facilitate all those investigations. Here in San Jose, we've come to the point, I believe last year was our record year, and we investigated 10,400 cyber tips just in the city of San Jose. I believe LAPD had 26,000. So between the two of us, we had 36,000 cyber tips come in. So we've come to the point now with the issue that we believe that really the only way we're going to solve this is through education. Here at San Jose PD, whenever we're talking promotions and everybody talks about collaboration. So I think we've come to the point now where it's time to collaborate and get parents involved and get the community involved so everybody understands how bad this problem is that we're challenged with. We're understaffed, overwhelmed, so we need some help. One of the things that we do here at San Jose PD is called the Vigilant Parent Initiative, and it's an interactive program that was created by the prior ICAC commander, Lieutenant Brian Spears. And it is a program that is interactive with parents that we put on at schools, facilitated by the schools. But instead of just listening to us talk, we have all kinds of iPads that we bring, and parents are able to, as they're listening to the talks, they can go live online and go through the apps, and we teach them how to protect their children online through the apps, because we found a lot of parents, they may be computer savvy, but they just don't understand the apps and how fast these apps are moving. I think everybody would agree that when it comes to apps and it comes to internet, children are way above us. They learn a lot quicker. They're using them every day in school. So they know the ins and outs of them. And there's a lot of stuff where we can use in those apps where we can protect our children. I think with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Sean. My name is Melissa Strobel. I'm joining from Thorn today. Thorn is a nonprofit that builds tech to combat online sexual exploitation. And we do that really by focusing our efforts on 3 core audiences. Number 1, youth and their communities. Number 2, victim identification teams. And finally, industry efforts. So we're building tech and programs that are specifically targeting the needs of those different communities and the role they play in combating online sexual exploitation and safeguarding young people in their online experiences. Now, the team that I oversee, I'm our head of research and insights at Thorn, and research has sort of a unique role within the organization, as well as is growing in terms of how it can support the global community working on this issue in general. Our research team focuses in understanding, number 1, the current landscape of online sexual exploitation. So what is the prevalence of it? What are the tactics? I think everybody on this call recognizes that data can be a challenge at times. That is one of the areas that we focus on. How can we ensure that we have current data that stays up to date and is reflective of what youth are experiencing in this field to ultimately inform the programming and the tactics we take as a community to protect those kids in online spaces. Our research also looks to the horizon. What is coming down the pipeline? As Jen pointed out, we are so often limited in being reactive exclusively because of how quickly the space is changing, but also how strapped we are from a resourcing perspective in general. If we are in a position where we have got one extra head that we can hire as a team who is tasked with identifying kids, safeguarding kids, that head is going to go to the front lines because they need it very urgently. And so it is a challenge to ever get really forward looking. So rather than feeling like we are 3 years behind, we are maybe 1 year behind, and in the future, not behind. We are getting a little bit more out ahead of ourselves, and tech is better prepared in how they are building because they have the knowledge to anticipate how that tech might ultimately be a place of vulnerability for young people or be a place of opportunity in terms of the resources and the support that it can offer to young people. I myself have been with Thorn now for almost 5 years. I've been working in this space for more like 15, and prior to joining Thorn, spent the earlier times of my career with NCMEC on Jen's team and working with some of the others on this call doing victim identification work. I slowly started to transition out of the direct victim ID work and start focusing more on that research gap. What are those opportunities in that space where we can start investing in research? And luckily, Thorn is one of those places where we're able to prioritize that. Joe?
Melissa, I'm going to go back to you in a little bit on the research that you're seeing, but I think we need to start with what is our definition of these topics that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to go to you, Mr. Jim Cole, and ask you, because that term self-generated may not be something that everyone really understands. It has a variety of different names. So I'll let you take it from there and explain what self-generated content is.
Sure. So, and from the law enforcement perspective, what we're seeing is this is content that is generally speaking being coerced and extorted from minors. So the common scenario that we see are minors who are online in different platforms looking to engage, usually with their peers or a peer of the opposite sex, to engage in conduct and to engage in communication, usually wanting that communication to be fairly harmless. And what happens is an individual on the other side, and the motivations for this, we see both a sexual motivation, so individuals who are interested in sexual material that depicts minors are one of the offender types that we see out there, engaging and usually acting like a minor to start that communication, and then kind of start to see if they can get the minor to take a picture that oftentimes a minor might think is fairly harmless. So toward a female, it might just be the bare breasts, it might be a pose that they're asking for, etc. And then once that image goes over or video, then that person will use that against the minor to get them to engage in more serious conduct, and then take either image or video of that, provide it to the offender, or to live stream that in some type of live streaming application where the offender is then recording it. The other side of this house that we're now seeing, and we're in a huge uptick just in recent months, to be honest, is organized crime groups, generally based overseas. Largely, we're seeing this now occurring from a couple of African nations, which is difficult to investigate, where the motivation is not this actual sexual conduct. The motivation is actually financial. And so what they're doing is they're extorting these minors and sometimes their families for money in various means that they'll request, with the threat of putting that content out to their peers, to their family, to their schools or other fraternal maternal organizations they may be involved with, and basically publishing that content publicly. And the tactics that they use, quite honestly, are pretty brutal. We have seen, we have seen some really egregious threats of violence, threats of putting this out there. Oftentimes, the offenders will engage on social media with the victim, and through social media exploitation, we'll learn where they live, where their house is, what school they go to, what their friend groups are, who their parents are, who other relatives are that are associated to them. Because once you friend somebody, in a social media circle, then they get access to all that type of information. And then they go out and they can find other photos of family and use all that as part of the coercion and the threats towards that minor victim. And so the effect that this has is we see minor victims who are completely caught off guard once this starts to happen. Once the threats come in, we see minors that engage, unfortunately, are threatened and coerced into engaging in, more serious sexual conduct that then only deepens the control that the offender has over them. And we've seen minors that have engaged in really desperate behavior, from kind of a variety of ways to sometimes including engaging in acts with minor siblings, or on the other side of that is self-harm all the way to suicide. And so it's a really, really serious issue.
It is a very serious issue, and it's something that does concern me greatly. The scenario that you spoke of, the egregiousness of the offending. One of the things that I'd like to step back a little bit from is the idea of how youth are still sending imagery to others. and how it can be used by these offenders, but also how it can be damaging to youth when it's shared by just someone that they know. And that's where I'm going to go to you, Jody, and ask, what are you seeing as the victim's issue when it comes to how this is affecting them when someone is sharing without consent?
It's significantly impacting how they're doing, how they're able to talk about it, how they're able to process it. But I want to go back just a little bit further, Joe, with what we know about the development of our adolescents and why they are so vulnerable online, and that impact also for their mental health, looking forward in the future, and the guilt that they feel. And so if you look back at what we know just simply about brain development, and the part of their brain that is doubling in size is that amygdala housing, the parts that control like hormones and emotions, and we've all experienced that. I think the difficult thing for society, for parents and law enforcement, all of us, is that we experience that in a very different world than what they're experiencing it in, and they have the easy access to it. And so they've been warned about it. However, it's difficult to warn our adolescents about it when, as adults who didn't grow up with it, we don't even understand it. Even the way that they talk, or the words that they use, like, I'm friends with. It's constant. Yesterday in an interview, I'm breaking it down. You said that you only have people on there that you know. Are these people that you know face to face? And they're like, well, if my friend I know face to face is friends with them, then yes. So we have to understand where they're at, because having that number of friends and followers meets that emotional connection, that piece of it where they really are thriving on that emotional connection, that sexual curiosity, and all of those things. And so then they're very vulnerable online. Then once it gets to the point where we become involved, they have just an inordinate amount of guilt, and they don't understand, like, how could I do this? I disappointed my parents. I've been told not to do this, and now it's going to cost my parents a lot of money. Does it impact my career, my school, all of these other things that are happening? And the young man that I talked to yesterday, he said, I just want it to go away because I feel so bad. One of the new trends that Jim was talking about, it's like we and Melissa, like, being proactive and understanding these new trends and how they're impacting kids, because as we educate for one thing, new things are being developed in order to take advantage of those vulnerabilities of our adolescents online. So one of the new things that I heard about just yesterday was this young man, an organization, quote unquote organization, contacted him, said, I understand that you're interested in science. We can help you get to the college and alleviate some of that financial burden from your family. And then multiple people contacted him. It got to the point where he had sent, just very benign type of pictures. And then it escalated into wanting more. And a teenager reached out to him, said, hey, I'm doing this. It paid for my first 2 years of college, and so on and so forth. And so now, it built on that automatic teen guilt and where they're at, and they're being constantly entrusted to be more adult-like than what their brain is allowing them to be. And so they're thinking, I'm going to help my family, and now I'm in this mess, and now I've caused my family that I'm trying to help more distress than what originally was present. And so I think that when we're looking at how our kids are developing and understanding, we were vulnerable too. I will often tell them, I'm glad the internet didn't exist when I was a kid. And so we explain it to them and have very real conversations, very much like Belinda was talking about before. Meet them where they're at. Don't talk down to them, and say, listen, this is how come I know it's not your fault. And walk them through it and let them know those curiosities were always there. There's things that your parents probably did that probably they don't want you to know, or still don't want their parents to know about. And so I think just having those real open, honest conversations, but also understanding where they're at in their development is what we need to do, looking forward in order to protect them and educate not only them, but also people on our MDTs and their parents. And I hope that that answered both parts of your question, Joe.
That was very helpful. Thank you. And so thanks, Jim and Jody, for setting the stage here. And now I'm going to turn it over back to you, Melissa, and ask you to give us some of your latest research on what you're seeing regarding self-generated content, and then also regarding the issue of sextortion.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. For some context, I saw a couple of comments in the chats in terms of when data is coming in from. The numbers that I'm sharing with you today are typically from surveys fielded in 2020. We have now data from 2019, 2020, and this would have been October, November of 2020, so end of year. We also now have the raw data in from 2021, and I will just say out ahead of this data, the 2021 data is lining up very closely with what we saw in 2020. So that's where kind of our recent data point is coming from in terms of the prevalence of these issues. I also want to set the stage a little bit in terms of what the research is focused on. For us, we've framed this as our self-generated child sexual abuse material pipeline of research. We survey young people 9 to 17. We also survey caregivers on this topic. Now, for us, when we're talking about self-generated abuse imagery, importantly, we try and use that label exclusively for the content itself, the images, and isolating that as essentially images or videos that we do not see another party in the room for the taking of those images. Because what we've also learned from the research is that the pathways leading to the production of self-generated imagery are wildly disparate. We have exploration on one side where young people are sharing nudes with, say, their romantic partner who they see in science class every day. We have on the other side of the spectrum instances of sextortion and of grooming and some of the very different harms that come in there. And obviously there's a big spectrum in between the two. But when we are presented with those images, we do not know what the origin story was for that case. And so it makes it really challenging to come up with a label that's adequate when we're just looking at the image level. So for this data, we are talking self-generated abuse imagery. Now, what I will say in terms of the scale of it is at this point, we are hearing that from 9 to 17-year-olds, a third of them view sharing nudes as a normal behavior among peers. Now, it is not exclusive to teens. In fact, 1 in 5 9 to 12-year-olds also tell us that they think it's a normal behavior. The self-report numbers of those who have actually shared nudes of themselves are lower, and that's something that we expect to see. Put another way, kids think it's a more common behavior than they themselves are engaging with. That gives us a bit of an opportunity there because it gives us a chance to speak to those perceptions of how common this is as a way to maybe kind of give them a little bit of grounding in reality. But that said, the numbers are still pretty concerning. What we hear is that overall, for 9 to 17-year-olds, 1 in 5 have themselves shared nudes. Now, the numbers are only slightly lower for 9 to 12-year-olds. In 2020, we heard about 14% of 9 to 12-year-olds say that they had shared their own nudes. Worryingly, this was twice the number of 9 to 12-year-olds that we heard that from the first year that we fielded this survey back in 2019. So clearly there is a great deal of risk for those younger audiences, and holding off to have these conversations until, say, we're in high school and we think that's when we need to have the talk is far too late for this particular issue. Now, going back to that spectrum, we have the exploration on one side, we have exploitation on the other side. But of those kids who themselves are saying they have shared nudes, because importantly, not all of these cases come in front of law enforcement. And so it's unsurprising that a big majority of those cases in front of law enforcement involve that level of coercion, involve that level of exploitation. It is less often, though not exclusive, of those cases where it is potentially an exploratory sharing of nudes. But half of kids who have shared nudes say they've done it with a stranger. So that's a really big number that we're concerned about there. And of the strangers, we've got 40% of kids who said they're sharing nudes are sharing them with someone they think is an adult. Now, in some of our more recent research, and to avoid getting too data heavy in here, and I'll drop links to our full research reports. You guys can always go see them in more detail. But in our most recent research around grooming, we actually added a layer of detail to bucket those relationships a little bit more precisely. So rather than saying you've shared nudes with an adult, we've then looked to see, are we talking about an 18 to 20-year-old? And it turns out those numbers are skewed to younger adults. But we also see significant numbers saying they are sharing nudes with 21 to 29-year-olds and 30 and older. So right there, we have some other opportunities there. And when we're considering the risk for, say, a 17-year-old who's sharing with a 19-year-old, who we also have to consider, this may be somebody they go to school with at that point in time. That may not be someone who is remote. It may be someone in their science class. It's a very different experience if we're talking about a significant age gap, irregardless of if that person is an adult or not. If we're seeing instances of 17-year-olds who are asking 10-year-olds for nudes, which is happening as well, we are seeing that type of coercion and extortion happening as well as 9-year-olds who think it is normal to be dating and flirting with 30-year-olds online. So ultimately, we do see sort of a wide range, but we see a significant number who are, in fact, sharing with strangers and have these much higher risk profiles for the type of sharing that's happening. But one of the things that we can take away from this when we're thinking about the opportunities to intervene and safeguard young people from these risks is it would be a mistake to be overly broad in our messaging with young people and our safeguarding conversations and have it be just completely binary. Don't talk to strangers. Don't do this, don't do that. We have to go further than that because they're going to hear the thing that is really not what resonates with them. They're immediately going to be defensive. And they are going to see something different in sharing nudes with someone who is the same age as them in their school than sharing nudes with someone who is a stranger online. The other thing there is that we need to give the kids the language to have it, because what we see as a very concerning theme is the degree to which young people are not disclosing, in large part because of the perception of blame and shame, which Jody, you spoke to, really elegantly a couple minutes ago. 2 out of 3 kids who have been in our surveys who told us that they experienced something harmful online. Now, this is not exclusive to sexual interactions. It's inclusive of those. It's inclusive of being approached and asked for nudes. It's also inclusive of things like bullying and harassment. But 2 and 3 kids who've had that experience never told anyone. And the reason they say overwhelmingly is because they don't think it's important. The next thing they say is they're embarrassed and ashamed to say what has happened to them. There's a significant opportunity there where we can improve outcomes for young people if we're doing a better job in how we respond when kids come to us and ask for help. More than half of the caregivers that we have surveyed place the blame either exclusively or predominantly on the victim in cases where their nudes have been leaked, non-consensually reshared. It is a knee-jerk reaction to say you should have known better. And if we're having that reaction to a 10-year-old, they shouldn't have known better. Even if we've had the conversation with them, they're 10, but that is where we are starting from, in part because we're scared. We're having an emotional reaction to those conversations. And so those are some of those places where we have an opportunity to change the kids' how they think the outcome is going to go. If a child is recognizing a situation wherein they need help, they should not be making a decision, which is unfortunately where we currently are, deciding between the negative outcomes and reaction they may have in their offline worlds from friends who are calling them a slut, from caregivers who are saying they should have known better, with their ability to manage a threat from a stranger online. And unfortunately, that is the decisions that some kids are making right now, and it's resulting in really scary and deadly at time outcomes.
Thanks so much, Melissa. I think that you bring up such a good point of the vulnerability that our youth have. But I also I'm going to ask this of you, Jen. I want some information on why do you think youth are vulnerable to these types of situations and crimes. And not necessarily are all of the things that they're doing online crimes. So I don't want to insinuate that. But what makes youth vulnerable? And then add to that just a bit, if you can, what makes youth not want to tell? So Jen, take it away.
From, again, from our response to these incidents, and talking with the families and the youth, I think what we see is, number one, today's youth are growing up and we're in an incredibly digital age. I think there's so much content, so much about our daily lives that's now digital, that's online, that's on our phone, right? If you think about a mobile device, when I was growing up, the idea of a handheld computer as powerful as our mobile devices are now was complete science fiction. And so in today's day and age, there's incredible content that is beneficial, that's educational, that's all these things. But then alongside of that, there's this, anytime that you build something with good intentions, there are people who will take advantage of that and use it for nefarious activity, right? And so our youth are trying to be connected in a way that we weren't when we were kids, because like for us, it was to go outside and group and gather with kids from a neighborhood. Now that there's this whole world open online, and gaming is such a prevalent thing, and that's a platform that offenders use, and social media, obviously. And we even see, some of our most vulnerable youth, the LGBTQ community, the children who are struggling with sexual orientation or have those questions, or are going online to find answers, right? Or to go to platforms. We're seeing offenders take advantage of them horrifically on those platforms, right? Because you take a youth who's already vulnerable, and now there's an added set of vulnerabilities where they're seeking information, and individuals are taking advantage of that. And so I think all these things just contribute to more youth being online, and then add, COVID as an issue drove even more people into being online, right? You look at the general workforce. I mean, most of us were online almost exclusively for at least some amount of time. And kids are very, they were exposed to that too. And they see how much adults are online. And so it's just one of those things where, that's a difficult issue. Now, the one thing that I strongly talk to parents about, it's like, well, we say something like, gaming platforms are being used by offenders to target and offend against children. Well, then, parents immediately like, well, I'm not going to let my kid game. And that reaction is really going to be counterproductive, right? That's going to be the way to kind of address those types of issues is to have conversations, right? And it's not a single conversation. It's an ongoing conversation that needs to happen, and it needs to be open and honest. And these conversations have to be about the platforms. And if you know the risks and what to look out for and what to do if something happens, and where to go to a trusted adult, to those kinds of things. So it's not about cutting kids offline, like that's not even really a possibility. One of the things that we struggle with, like in Tennessee, is we have many schools that hand out tablets to students, right? They hand out tablets, and they do this contract about conduct, right? But they don't really go in and teach them about the vulnerabilities and about how offenders will approach them. It's like, well, you won't do this, and you won't do that, and you will do this, and you will do that. And the problem with those contracts is it actually prevents kids from telling, because they've broken the contract, right? And so instead of teaching kids about how to be safe and how to utilize these tools for what they were meant for, instead they're signing these like, behavior contracts as related to the technology. And then when a kid does something that violates it, well, are they going to tell? Of course they're not, right? They're not going to tell. And I think that's another conversation that, parents are kind of doing that too, right? Like, the idea that let's talk about, you know better, you should have known better, is a concept that also drives kids not to tell, right? And so the conversation really needs to be more about, hey, here's how to avoid the situation, but then if it does happen, here's how to move forward and so we can deal with it appropriately.
Thanks, Jim. And taking the idea of putting all these devices in kids' hands at schools and then sharing the don't list, don't do this, don't do that. One of the things that I do think is a great idea for schools is that they send home parents signature forms at first of the year, and those forms get into the backpacks of all the students, and then they get into the parents' hands, and all parents do is sign, move on. We don't read, we just sign. So if you have a device policy that you're sending home with your students, I recommend that you wait 2 weeks after school started and send that home, and you'll have more opportunities to have those read than not if you send them all with the other forms that everything has to be done. But I want to step back just again on the parent part, Jen, and ask you, why is it that not so much that kids don't tell, because I think we can kind of figure out part of that, but what is it that parents can do to help them tell? So instead of saying why they don't, let's talk to parents and say why they will.
Right. Well, first, a couple comments just from what I've heard, Jody and Melissa, both when you talk about, how could you do that, that response to kids. I mean, don't we even say that to some of our friends who are our age and we even say that. So to have this incredible responsibility on a child that they should have decision-making and that sort of judgment at 10, 12, 14, 16 is really rich coming from us when we see our peers at our ages who, we're kind of like smacking their hands about some of the stuff that they post too. So I mean, you see where the challenge is, and just, social media and just the internet has just created another world. And, I think also when we talk about self-generated content, I think words matter. And, Joe, you and I chatted even a little bit about this, and I think we're all respectfully talking about it. I think, there's different words out there for what this content is, right? The images and videos that are created by a child where, to your point, Melissa, there's no one in the room. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that we're not blaming the child. We want to make sure that we are just not victim blaming, and we're not saying that there's something inherently wrong with these children for what they've done. Here at NECMEC, we use kind of two different terms. So we have self-produced, which means that the child knowingly, purposely took that photo or that video, and where the non-consensual part comes to what you alluded to, Joe, is the sending and the receiving of that, right? So someone either sent it out or it was received by a much smaller audience and then sent out or distributed way beyond whatever the scope was of the child who took that image or video. And then we have the online enticement, which is what Jim talked a little bit about, where there's that luring, that coercion component, where that child's deceived into making that image or video, and then that's leveraged to become, sextortion, where there's the request or demand for money for a meetup or certainly for more imagery and that sort of thing. And that's really, like you said too, Jody, like weaponizing these children's fear of embarrassment and shame. Like that is what they're doing. They are just weaponizing that and taking advantage of that and holding that over the child who is just scared to death that their school, their friends, their family are going to see these photos of them. And so, I think too, it's important that we also realize that this is how kids are growing up. Belinda mentioned that in her talk a couple times, but we are just living where going online is the same as going outdoors. I mean, it's just a different space, but just as natural. And for us, parent age People these days, we, like Belinda said, we didn't grow up with that. And so it is not first nature to us, but it is for these kids that when they're doing their sexual exploration, their sexuality exploration, they are doing it online. It is a safe space for them to do that. And it is natural for them. So I think when you talk about the parental response, Joe, it's got to be less alarm always, and just more of an understanding. And, in the past, over the years, there's been talk about filters and blockers, and certainly there's the parental controls and all of that. Policing is a tool in the toolbox, but it is not the tool in the toolbox. The main one, the best one, is as easy as it is hard, which is communication, right? And opening that dialogue with your child, which seems really easy because you don't have to go buy something, you don't have to install anything. But man, starting that conversation can be super awkward. I mean, these conversations involve sexuality, sex, and technology. And you want to put a parent into an awkward spot, pick one of those three things, and that'll do it. And so when you combine it, it's really this reluctance to have these conversations and get them started. So, I think that's why there's a lot of material out there. Certainly NECMEC has some, but even to what this whole campaign is, hashtag start the conversation. That's what we're trying to do, because we have just found that it matters. And, Jim, I think you even said it too at one point, when we talk about parents who want to help their kids navigate this online world, just don't start giving directives. Don't say you can go on this app, but not that app. Sit down and say, what apps do you want to be on? Like, where are your friends? Like, why your kids are getting online. They want to be with their friends. They want to be where it's cool and where the social network is. So start there, to Jody's point, meet them where they are. So I want to be on this particular app, sit down with them and say, how can we get you there safely? And really try to be part of that journey with them so that they feel that it's not a restrictive thing. Because when you start doing that policing, you're just pushing them to go find another device, someone else's tablet, someone else's phone, where they'll access it just the same. So it's really about building that confidence and that open communication. And really it's that knee-jerk reaction, like Melissa said, it's that, how could you do that? It's because the parent's scared. It's because we're scared for our kids. But all that does is make them clam up and shut down. And so we have to say, it's okay, talk to me, tell me what happened, and be part of the solution. And if you want to be angry later, or you need to express yourself, because as a parent, as a trusted adult, you're going to have your own emotions about it. But just don't let that be a deterrent for the kids. And that's why these conversations are so key, with our net smarts, and especially with the sextortion that we've started talking about. We do offer discussion guides where, you can watch a video, you can, listen to a learning module, and then we provide those questions. So you don't have to think about them. You can just start getting your kids talking, kind of follow along, and it really helps kind of break down these conversations. So it's much more approachable and a lot easier to have. But quite honestly, it is just that communication, it's that engagement that's really going to be the solution here with our kids. And that's what we're seeing with that financial sextortion that we've talked about. For the past few months, we've seen a huge uprise in that through the cyber tip line. We have kids reaching out to us who are telling us that they're suicidal, that they're having suicidal ideation. They feel hopeless. They are scared. And it's heartbreaking to read and to hear their phone calls and talk to them. And, I don't want to be an alarmist, but we certainly do want to ring the alarm about what is happening with this, because it is very real. We've looked at about 1,000 cyber tip reports that have come in just this year, this spring, regarding this financial sextortion, like Jim said, organized crime from Africa, which it can kind of sound crazy, right? You're going to say, my kid's not going to fall for that, or that's not going to be my child who's targeted, but it is happening, and we're losing kids over it. And I think the thing that probably Sean and Jim certainly can talk to too is the speed of which this happens. This is not the traditional online enticement for that imagery. Like, this is not a sexually motivated crime, like Jim said. So this isn't the contact the child, groom them over a period of weeks and months, and get them to take more explicit imagery or videos, that sort of thing. This is all about money, and it happens within 2, 4, 6 hours. And these kids are desperate, and they're being told, if you don't give me $1,000, I'm going to send this to everyone on your network. And these, again, that weaponization of that fear and that shame just takes these kids. And we have kids who are going into their beds at night and not coming out, and it's awful. And we don't want that. It's mainly boys who are being targeted. Ages between 14 and 17 is what we're seeing the most of. And so for the parents out there, please just start talking to your kids about this. There are things that can be done when that happens. Certainly you can reach out to law enforcement, you can reach out to NECMEC, but we really do want to sound the alarm on that because we're seeing it happen. And I know Sean has personal experience with that too, with his investigations. But we certainly just want to make sure that, parents know to take their kids seriously if they come to them and to really open that door.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks for mentioning hashtag Start the Conversation. Sean and I work on a public awareness working group with the ICAC task force, and that is our campaign slogan: Start the Conversation, because we do believe that the conversation is the most important thing that parents can do, and I think you're going to hear that over and over and over throughout today's event. Sean, I'm going to go to you and have you address the issue that Jen was talking about, and most importantly, the speed of it and the reaction that you're hearing from those that you're working those type of cases.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. First of all, before I get into that, I just wanted to add to what Jen was saying. Everybody says start the conversation, talk to your child, but a lot of parents always ask us, how do I do that? What do I say? What am I supposed to talk about? So some of the stuff that we talk to parents about with our Vigilant Parent Program, the first question we ask in that class is, by the raise of hands, how many parents in here know the password to their child's device? And it's getting better, but overwhelmingly, it's very few people know the passwords to their child's device. So we always talk to them about that. This is, everybody's worried about privacy. So we have to reiterate, we understand privacy. But in my opinion, we're seeing kids as young as 5 years old that have, a 1 terabyte iPhone that has access to the whole entire internet. So we always talk about make sure you know the password, and then random looking through the phone, searching the phone. We talk about also is if your son or child, if your child wants an app that they want to use, not only go and research that app, but how about you put the app on your phone too and use the app as well, because it's going to give you a better understanding of the app, and then you're more involved. Your kid, you could talk to your kid on the app. But the biggest thing for us is researching that app. There's a lot of apps out there that give you clues of why you should not have that app. There's one app out there, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody from using it, called Imagery, and their tagline is "Talk to Strangers." Why would anybody let their child go to an app that their tagline is "Talk to Strangers"? You log in, and they put you in touch with complete strangers. As far as video games, everybody knows that there's an attachment to video games where kids can chat. We encourage parents, hey, part of your having that conversation is, if you don't, play the video games with your kids, get online, interact with them, play the video game. That way you'll kind of know what kind of stuff is being talked about in the video game. And little stuff like turning in your phone at the end of the night. You don't need a phone in the middle of the night because you're in the house with me. If anything happens, you can come to me. So you turn your phone in at the end of the night, because that's, I think, where a lot of this is happening, is in the middle of the night, 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And then look for the signs. If you have a child that's a straight A student you never had any issues with, and all of a sudden they're sleepy, they're tired, they're not going to class, they're getting bad grades, those should be signs that something's going on. And a lot of times it is they're staying up all night long. And lastly, the one tip I give to parents when it comes to the topic of your child is chatting with someone on an app. How do I know who it is? How do I know if my child knows? And I tell this to children too, is all phones have a video chat app on it. So if you find someone that you're talking to on Fortnite and you decide, hey, this is a cool person, they're 13 years old, same age, I want to be friends with this person. I always tell kids, go to your video chat on your phone and have that person video chat with you one time. Because it's very hard for someone that's in that chat room for predatory reasons. It's very hard for them to disguise a video chat. So that way you can confirm, okay, that is a 13-year-old. We're going to be friends now. And then for parents to keep an eye out on the clues that you should see is when people are asking you to go to different chats. If you're chatting in one chat room and then they want to go to another platform, that should be a sign, because when they start going from regular platforms, Google Hangouts, and all of a sudden they want to go to Snapchat or they want to go to WhatsApp, fully encrypted. Those should be the signs of why are they going to this next chat room. And then I'll talk about the sextortion. In my jurisdiction in California, it's completely out of control right now. We were just getting them from the police department, and now we're getting them from NCMEC. And what we've found, and this is just the terms that we use, is we have split our sextortion cases into predatory sextortion and monetary sextortion. So we all been talking about predatory extortion here, or sextortion, and that could be anywhere from child on child at school, asking a girl to see a picture, and then once he gets it, he sends it to his friends. Or it could be a bad person that's online that's there for that reason, to extort someone for videos or pictures. And most of those are going to be, and I think Jen brought it up, those are going to be more long-term, where there's grooming involved, when there's chatting over a period of time, a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. The one that we are starting to see a lot of, and I'm sure everybody has, is we call it the monetary sextortion. And in these are people that are, and it can happen to anybody. This is not just for kids. I don't think that they are targeting children. I think what's happening is a lot of times now, children are putting their age as higher than it is online. So they might say, hey, I'm 19, because it's easier to get into apps, when they're not. So they are hit up randomly by somebody, and it starts as a small conversation. Hey, how you doing? I saw your Snapchat. I saw your snaps. Do you want to chat? But it progresses very fast. The people that are on the other line of this are in it for money only. They're not in it for the videos. They're in it for money. And then the sextortion starts, where they start asking, hey, let's go in a room. Let's go in this other chat room. Let's go from Google Hangouts to Snapchat. Hey, let's trade videos. And these people that are doing it, they're using live videos that they've received online. They set the tone for the conversation, not the child victim. The predator is setting the tone. So he has videos set up so it makes it look like that you're actually talking to someone real that could be somewhere in your age range. And what we're seeing is, once it is agreed upon and the video or the sexual picture is sent, instantly within 10 seconds, this sextortion starts. The asking for the picture ends and the sextortion starts. And it always starts with high value money. And of course, kids don't have that money. They negotiate down all the way down until they actually pay the money. So the big question is, should I just pay? That's a hard question, because what we're seeing is, once you pay, it's not going away. They're just going to keep going. Once you pay, now they're going to say, okay, now I want more money, and it's not going to go away. So it's a discussion that, we tell kids, hey, you got to go to somebody. You have to tell your teacher, you have to tell your counselor, you have to tell your parents immediately and make that decision. Because sometimes what we have seen, and this is just our research here, is if you just delete everything, most of the time it goes away. And then they just move on to the next one, because these guys don't have time. They're going to the next person. It's for money only. So they don't have time to sit and talk to you forever, or a day or 2 days. They'll just move on to the next person. After we're discussing here, you're going to see a video. So if you're on now, I encourage you to stay to the end of the session at least. You're going to see a video from a local parent here in San Jose, who her son, a young man named Ryan Last, was sextorted, and he ended up taking his own life. Horrible case, just got accepted to college, and he didn't know what to do. He was scared. Imagine if you're 40 years old and you get caught in one of these, and you're married and you're a CEO of a company. Imagine what that feels like. Everybody's going to know I'm going to get fired. Now imagine putting that weight on the shoulder of a young child, a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old, and they don't know what to do. And in this case, unfortunately, money was paid, and it still ended up in a suicide. So talking to kids, starting the conversation, like I said, with our program that we have here, the Vigilant Parent Program. And for those that are in ICAC, or anybody that is interested, just contact your local ICAC. It's already been distributed to all the ICACs. It's a great presentation. Like I said, it's only for parents, but it educates parents on stuff about apps, like join the apps, research the apps before you let your child download the app. Because I don't see any end in sight in what is going on, especially with the monetary sextortion. Based on what we're seeing, this is $1 million industry. They're making a lot of money. And the only thing we're really seeing that's getting reported are the ones with juveniles. We're not getting the reports from the adults. And I just don't see this going away because it's so lucrative for them.
And one of the questions that I have was going back to your particular case, how much time did it take for the first point of contact until this terrible act of suicide?
It was about 6 hours from the initial contact. It was a Friday night, about 6 o'clock at night. It was when the first contact, and about 6 hours later is when the suicide occurred. And all the ones that we have seen have been very, very quick. We did our Vigilant Parent Program right after this happened. We did our Vigilant Parent Program here in San Jose, and we had 1,100 people on the Zoom call. And about a week later, obviously it worked, because about a week later, a young man from another school had the same exact thing happen to him. And his mom had told him about this, and he went directly to his mom and said, "Mom, that's what I did. I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but I don't know what to do." And his mom handled it. That one there, they were lucky. Mom just deleted everything, had a few choice words for the suspect, deleted everything, and nothing ever happened. But we're seeing common themes where at the end of the sextortion, if they're not getting what they want, they will post a picture of the picture that you sent, and then they will post the list from your Snapchat, your Facebook, of all your friends. And that's like the last thread, like, I'm going to post this. So imagine you're 16 years old and you're like, "I'm not paying, no way." And then all of a sudden they show that picture of you, the compromising photo, and then all your friends from school. Imagine being 16-year-old and trying to take that in. It's a lot for anybody to take in, much less a young child. And it's across the board. It's not 17-year-olds. It's not 15-year-olds. I mean, it's happening with all age of children. And, the same thing everybody's saying, kids, they're ashamed. They don't want to get in trouble. So that's why it's so important for parents to have the conversation, talk about these topics. Say, this is what's going on right now on the internet. If anything like this ever happens to you, you've got to come to me so we can fix the problem together. And then obviously talking about the photos, the self-generated content. As everybody knows, sexuality is everywhere now. It's being pushed in movies. It's being pushed in music videos, and the music industry. So it's desensitizing kids, and they come to the point where, like, hey, this is normal. Everybody does it. My idol on TV does it. My idol from this music does it. So what's the big deal? And then once they get desensitized of sharing it to one friend, sharing it to their boyfriend, they don't think it's that big of a deal. And then when a predator comes in, it makes it so much easier, because they're like, okay, yeah, this guy here wants to chat with me. I'll go ahead and do it. The internet is internet obviously helps us in everyday life, but it's so dangerous. I'll give you one example and then I'll stop. But I just got a case 2 days ago where a 40-year-old guy went into our local mall and he used AirDrop. He went into the food court and he AirDropped a message that said, "You're cute." That's it. And whoever had their AirDrop on that was accepting contacts got it. An 11-year-old girl got the message and she clicked on it and she started chatting with him and she agreed to meet him in the mall. And it just started with a random AirDrop. They weren't friends. They'd never seen each other before in their life. They don't know each other. How brazen is that for you to just go into a mall and hit "You're cute" and to see who? It's like a fishing expedition. So that's why it's so important that we educate these kids on the dangers of the apps, the flags when they start asking you to go to other apps where stuff is encrypted, and then just having that conversation. There's nothing to hide. Let the kids know this is what is happening. This is what is going on here. So we do not have another Ryan Last. One is too many, and we don't want it to ever happen again.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. Jody, I want to transition just a little bit away from the actual crime part of it, but go to the feeling that these kids are having, and how do we get past the overwhelming shame and fear? What is it that parents could do better in helping their kids with that?
That's a really good question. I'm really happy that you asked that. I was going to piggyback off of some of the things that Jen had said, but again, one of the things that I talk about when I'm teaching is of a statement that Dr. David Walsh had made during one of his presentations. He's a researcher in adolescent brain development and behaviors. And what he described, and I think this is important for all of us and the parents to know, is he described the child's brain or an adolescent brain as the fastest, coolest car that you can be riding in. And it has all the gas, unlimited gas, but there's no brakes. And so what that is that amygdala that's firing all those hormones and that curiosity and risk-taking behaviors. There's no brakes where that prefrontal cortex is at, that executive functioning. I've been told not to do this, therefore I'm not going to do it. The brakes are like, I'm going too fast to stop this train. And so it's not there until they have these experiences. And unfortunately, their experiences are devastating now online because there's zero control once those images are out there. So I think first, understanding where the child is at, because when we talk to parents after our forensic interviews, we explain this and like, oh, and I said, think back to some of the decisions that you made as a child that you don't want other people finding out about, or that you're like, oh crap, that's dumb. I hope my kids don't ever do that. It brings it more into a context of their understanding. The other part of it too, Joe, is that with helping kids work through this, it's going to take the conversations with the parents and our team members too, because I've had, different areas that I've gone to that will go out and they'll teach in the school and they have all the best ideas and thoughts of like, I'm going to help these kids, but then they'll end it with, and technically you can be arrested. And so as soon as they make that statement, everything else that's been helpful goes out the window, because in that kid's brain is like, oh crap, I can get arrested because I sent this picture, regardless of it being self-generated or not. I was into this. I have boys tell me all the time, I was horny. Well, he's being honest. I mean, this is normal adolescent behavior, and we don't want to make them feel shameful of it. And so what I always tell even agents who come to me who have kids that are, getting to the point where they're online, 7, so on, and 5, like Sean was talking about, I say, have the conversations that you don't want other people having with your kids, because I guarantee you, your nervousness is prohibiting you from having open conversations. And the people online, they're treating them like adults, and kids want to be talked to like adults. My daughter has never been a baby talk person to all of her nieces and nephews younger to her. She talks to them like they're her age. She's their favorite. And it's because they don't dumb things down. She does not dumb things down for them. And so having those real conversations with them is much healthier than having someone else give them a skewed conversation. Because also, like Jim says, they're getting desensitized to these things. And so now you have a kid who's like, oh, they like me, and they think my body's pretty, where I hate my body. And then they're like, you know what? It would be really cool. Now let's do something with your sibling. Now let's do something with the dog. Now let's do something with like all kinds of deranged type of things that they're doing with these kids. It's desensitizing them to each act. And then they don't even know, okay, who do I talk to? I just offended on my sibling, or are they going to get rid of my dog because something happened to a dog? They don't have the capabilities internally to deal with that guilt, or even to process what could possibly happen. And so having that very real conversation, there's a ton of research out there that says, have conversations with your children before things happen. So for example, when girls start developing, they're saying it's usually like around 3rd grade now. Have that conversation in 2nd grade. Boys typically start having wet dreams in 4th grade. Have that conversation with them in the 3rd grade.
use the words that their friends will use for body parts too, because now it's no longer a joke. If mom and dad can say it's not a secret, and my mom says that word, she's comfortable with it. Therefore, I can talk to her about things. I read this research when my kids were much younger, and I have found that to be true. I've done the same thing with my niece and nephew, because again, I'm on my brothers and sister-in-laws about talk to them about these things. Stop penalizing them for the questions. Let them, see these books that are appropriate for age and have the conversations. Because if you don't, someone else is going to. I promise you that will happen. And when there's a will, there's a way to get online. I've had parents who are like, I'm locking everything down. I think Jim talked a little bit about that. Like, oh, we're locking everything down. I promise you, there's a will, there's a way. 12-year-old who got everything taken away after a situation, and she used Alexa to access her account on their smart TV so she could keep in with her social media. It has a camera and everything else. They're smart. We have to be more proactive. VR stuff is happening right now. So if we're looking at being proactive versus reactive, our laws are not catching up with the VR things. And we have to have these conversations early on before it escalates even further.
Sure. Thanks, Jody. One of the things I think it's really important to reiterate that you mentioned was the proper use of body parts, the naming of body parts. As an example, there was a young girl who disclosed to her teacher that her grandfather had put his hand in her pocketbook. Pocketbook was the term that she was using for her vagina, and the teacher said, "Well, you just tell your grandfather to keep his hands out of your pocketbook," because the teacher thought she was talking about a purse.
Yeah.
And so the child discloses and then thinks nobody cares. And she probably, she ended up disclosing again to someone else. But as it turns out, many children will disclose once. And if we don't take care of that opportunity of helping them when they do disclose, then we may have missed that opportunity to help that child. So thank you for bringing that up. Jim, I really want to turn just a second to reporting, because I was asked this question recently about law enforcement. Do they really know about this sextortion crime, that this new wave of sextortion crimes? And I want to ask, because you work so closely with local law enforcement and across the platform of other federal law enforcement as well, both U.S. and internationally. What are your thoughts on how do we report these type of crimes?
Sure. So there are multiple mechanisms to report. Look, we take these crimes very seriously. We deal with these, the ICAC system does as well, the FBI also. What we generally advocate in these situations, when it comes to either a parent's attention, is you definitely want to involve law enforcement. Generally speaking, we try at this point to manage this in as trauma-informed way as possible, and I think we're getting better at that. There's a little bit to go, but we're definitely getting better than that at that. So we try to when we deal with these situations, and it comes to our attention, we'll reach out to the family. We'll end up an in-person contact with the family. We will want to look at the devices that were involved, but we try to limit, oftentimes we'll try to obtain the kind of the download of those devices as quickly as possible so we can return the devices back to the family. When it is a predatory offense, what we generally see is those individuals are going to be offenders that are usually not always, but usually they're going to be folks that are going to do this multiple times for the sexual predilection, right? And oftentimes it may result in hands-on offenses. So we take those really, really seriously. The monetary offense we also take seriously, but it's a different issue. And again, as we talked about, multiple offenses. I mean, they're trying to target as many people as they can because that's going to influx the most money to them as possible. But we've gained a lot of ground in the past. It was difficult. A lot of these are coming from, African countries where law enforcement is not quite as advanced, especially in the cyber arena. But we're in the countries where this is happening from. We have gained a lot of ground in working with the host nation to identify the individuals and the organizations. And we have, right now, my office has multiple cases dealing with 2 specific African countries. We're working with the cyber unit at the national level in both of those countries. And we're already have identified individuals and organizations where enforcement action has taken place. And I think that's just going to continue to improve. And so, it's important to report. Again, there are multiple mechanisms. One of those mechanisms, and one of the ones I recommend the most, is actually the cyber tip line at NCMEC. The best part of that is that NCMEC will get that referral to a law enforcement agency within the jurisdiction that has the capability to work the crime set. Not all local law enforcement is resourced, equipped, and trained to deal with this issue, just because they deal with such a myriad of other issues. So the beauty of NCMEC and the cyber tip line is you can phone that in, you can go to a web form and fill that in and report it in that way, and they will get you to an appropriate law enforcement agency to handle that situation.
Hey, Joe, can I just add on something there?
You certainly may.
Yeah, that everything you said, Jim, I love. I think I would just also ask and add on to that. I think one of the knee jerks when we talk about reporting too is the importance of reporting to the platforms as well, like directly to the companies. Because when those reports come into the companies, they can also capture additional information and then pass that on to NCMEC, so that it's a much more robust report. And then, Jim and Sean, I'd also defer to you. Our recommendation also to people is, I think there's that instinct to just delete, right? Like you just want it to go away. So when those incidents happen, we have a special team that talks to the public who make reports to us and really helps dive into them and chat through what they're experiencing and get them resources, that sort of thing. But what we've also been advising them is, obviously, if you want to block that person, certainly you can, but don't delete your account, because that is where the investigative kind of clues can be found and where the investigation can start. So Jim and Sean, if you want to weigh into that, but I think that that's good counsel too for members of the public who may be listening in now on what to do, because I think, again, it's like when you get spam or something on your phone, I know my instinct is just delete. And when you want just something to stop and go away, that's what you want to do. But I don't know if always that's the best thing on the investigation side.
One of the things too, it comes down to also educating like our partners, like at the school system, because we have a lot of principals I've come across lately and SROs that are telling them just delete it. And so then we're missing that material to move forward in the investigation. So I think it comes down to us doing the trainings with our local partners as well.
Absolutely. And I know that for law enforcement, sometimes they just are not trained on this issue. But there are 61 internet crimes against children task forces around the country. There's one in every state, as Sean had mentioned. And there is a resource out there. And the just delete it is not the best option. It's not a good option at all, as a matter of fact. Melissa, I want to quickly we only have a few minutes because I still want to play this this video before we conclude. But I want to turn to you just kind of as a transition to the resources that your organization has Thorn on sextortion, because and particularly we know about the research, but the resources that you have and the Start the Conversation website that you've created.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. One of the things that we've been striving to do with our resources is to really meet kids where they are and focus on kind of moving forward from that place. Now, we have a couple of different resources that Thorn has built out, and I want to say I love it. Everybody on this call, I think, has some different resources that they prefer, and what I would encourage the audience to do is just find what works for you. Find what feels comfortable, find what's going to resonate with your kids, your communities. That's one of the great things about having some different resources out there, is that it's going to land differently for different kids, for different caregivers, really across the spectrum. So Thorn has a few. I know NCMEC's got some. I know San Jose is developing some new ones. FBI has some. Everybody's got some. Just take time to explore, particularly after Chris reshares those resources, I think, after our event. A few in particular I wanted to call out from Thorn. One is stopsextortion.com. That's one that we designed a couple years ago after doing our first wave of sextortion research, looking at the issue. And one of the things that was very clear even then, I think this was launched originally back in 2016 or 2017, was that challenge of blame and shame. And so it is a video. You can find it on YouTube. And as I said, I'll drop all these links into the chat. But it's just a kind of a cutesy cartoon video that's focused on, it literally starts with, so you did a thing. It's not relitigating whether or not you shared nudes. It's not relitigating why you did it, who you did it with, or anything like that. It is, so you did a thing. Let's talk about how we support you, how you get help, how do you start the conversation. And there are resources on that site for caregivers, peers, kids themselves, as well as industry, because all of those different entities have a role in safeguarding kids and supporting them as they navigate some of these risks. I also wanted to call out No Filter, which is a newer initiative we've been doing. That is No Filter with no E, so FILTR.org. And those are campaigns that are really designed to meet kids where they are, very specifically. No Filter isn't as focused on developing content for caregivers so much, but it is really focused on how are kids talking about this issue. One of the things that came through very clearly in our research, as the others have pointed out, is that if you aren't having the conversation with your kids, somebody is. So let's make sure that they've got a trusted resource out there to guide those conversations. Another piece that becomes very clear, and we've used caregivers a lot as kind of sort of a focus of the conversation. What resources do caregivers have? A lot of kids vulnerable to these risks do not have caregivers at home who are willing to have this conversation with them, or they feel safe at home having these conversations. For some, it's because they are queer youth who are exploring their sexuality and they are not out at home, whether it's because they are not at that place yet, because they are scared. Some of these kids are wards of the state and they don't have a caregiver who's having that conversation. So it is equally important to recognize that caregivers are not the only ones who have a role as part of the village to safeguard these kids. The last one I just wanted to give a nod to was Parents, Thorn for Parents, which are those caregiver tools. They are the conversation guides, they are the resource guides, they are bucketed by age group, because the thing that comes through time and time again is we need to have the conversations often and earlier, because we are waiting too long and we're thinking it's a one and done thing. You know, some of us feel like, all right, I've done this, I've checked that box, and we don't have it again. Talking about tough things requires practice, and we have to get practice at being a little uncomfortable. We cannot put the burden on kids to start those conversations. They don't all have to happen at once. You can talk about what it is to have consent, boundaries, what are the appropriate names for private parts. It doesn't all have to happen in one fell swoop, but if you start early and often, you're moving in the right direction. So yeah, those are some of the resources that we have out there.
Thanks so much, Melissa. There's so much good information that we've all had. I am now going to share this video that comes from the San Jose ICAC Task Force.
Hello, my name is Elle Washburn, Deputy Chief of the Bureau of Investigations for the San Jose Police Department, the lead law enforcement agency for the Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children here in California. I am here to introduce you to Ms. Pauline Stewart, mother to Ryan Last, who became a victim to online sextortion. Sextortion is a threat made by an individual stating that they will expose the victim's explicit or nude video or photo with others unless the victim complies with their demands. Often, the perpetrator extorts the victim for money or more explicit videos or photos in return. Ms. Stewart is here to speak on how one photo changed her son's and her family's lives forever.
My name is Pauline Stewart, and I'm a mother of 2 teenage boys. I'm here to tell you about my son, Ryan. Ryan was a victim of sextortion. Sextortion happens when a person blackmails or threatens to distribute your private or explicit photos or videos. If you do not send more explicit photos or videos, money, or engage in activities that may be sexual or illegal in nature. This individual may also threaten to harm your friends or family unless you comply with their demands. Unfortunately, Ryan ended up taking his life due to the extreme pressure that was put on him by the person demanding money and threatening to distribute explicit photos of him. My son Ryan was a senior at Ann Sobrato High School. He was a straight-A student who was planning on attending Washington State University and majoring in agricultural biotechnology. He loved the Future Farmers of America program and was their chapter secretary, and raised his sheep for their supervised agriculture experience project. He was also a Boy Scout who was working on his Eagle Scout project. He combined his love for FFA and Boy Scouts with the plan to build a shed for the school farm for his Eagle Scout project. In his junior year of his high school, he fell in love with a theater program. He has been involved in building the sets for the school productions. He was looking forward to starting college. He had just finished a tour of 6 Southern California colleges, which helped him decide on Washington State University. Ryan was a very trusting person. The individual who sextorted Ryan pretended to be a young girl interested in my son. They, in other words, catfished my son and gained his trust through flirting and showing interest. Ryan truly believed that he was talking to a young girl. This is one of the huge problems with social media. People can pretend to be anyone. The fact that he was told that they would send out or post the pictures on social media had a devastating impact on Ryan. He chose to end his life rather than have the pictures distributed on social media. He believed his reputation would be destroyed, and he was terrified of what his friends and family would think. I really want parents to understand that there are dangers with the online world our kids are involved in. My husband and I had parental controls on our kids' accounts. We knew their passwords, and they could not download any apps without our approval. We thought with all of these precautions that nothing like this could happen to our family. We honestly never thought that this was possible when we created the parental controls. We were so very wrong. We want to make sure that this does not happen to another family. We want to make sure that parents are aware of the risks out there. We would also like them to talk to their kids so that kids feel that they can come to their parents if they make a mistake. Social media is the way that kids are getting targeted in these types of scams. I think that parents should go home and talk to their kids about a few things, such as what apps they use and who they communicate with. I know that a lot of kids play online games against other people. One thing that I would like to stress is that if someone reaches out to them and tries to befriend them, they need to be very careful. I always loved that Ryan trusted and believed in people. Unfortunately, this was a huge part of what made Ryan the perfect target. I truly don't know how to create the correct balance between trusting and being skeptical. I know that parents need to talk to their children about what to do if someone they don't know reaches out to them. Ryan was my firstborn and an amazing and loving child. His loss has devastated our family. My younger son lost his brother, best friend, his innocence, and trusting nature in one night. Ryan's younger brother has never been interested in getting on social media before this and has had to grow up way too fast. Ryan truly believed that his error in judgment of trusting someone was too much to handle. Please stress with your child that you love them and that if something like this happens, that your family can work it out. We want to get Ryan's story out there so that no other family has to go through what we have. We want to educate both parents and kids about the risks out there, and especially about sending compromising pictures to people on the internet.
I want to remind everyone that on the OJJDP website, you will find a copy of that video. I want to say thank you to all of these amazing experts, and especially to Pauline Stewart for sharing her unthinkable loss and her important message to parents. Thank you.